The steam from the gravy was still rising when the baster struck my cheek. My father just kept carving. By the time dessert arrived, I knew exactly why she needed me silent, and how I was going to make every single person at that table listen to me instead. My name is Lydia Walker. I'm 32 years old, and I drove into Seacliff Bay just as the fog was burning off the water. This is my father's coastal lodge, his trophy house in a town where reputations sink faster than the tide. Gossip here is the local currency, and my stepmother, Vivian, spends it lavishly. Thanksgiving is her stage. Vivian Keats doesn't host a meal. She directs a production. The long driftwood table was already set, a performance of rustic elegance. Linen runners the color of sea glass, calligraphy name cards, angled at perfect 45-degree increments. Even the conversational topics were pre-approved. Confined to a set of rules laminated discreetly by the centerpiece, it was suffocating. My father, Graham Cole, was at the head of the table, performing his only assigned role. The rhythmic scrape of steel on steel filled the air as he sharpened the carving knife. Scrape, pause, scrape. He smiled at something over my left shoulder, a practiced, empty gesture that never quite reached his eyes. He hadn't made eye contact with me since I arrived. "And we are live," Tyler, my half-brother, announced to his phone. He panned the camera across the gleaming table, his ring light casting harsh circles on the polished wood. "Thanksgiving behind the scenes. Folks, the real deal." "Wonderful. Tyler, capture the ambiance," Vivian encouraged, her voice a saccharine melody. "It's all about the family image, the gratitude." I slid into my assigned seat, the wood cold against my legs. I was late, deliberately. Just late enough to disrupt the overture, but not late enough to miss the first act. "Lydia, you made it." Vivian's voice cut through the sound of the knife sharpener. She glided over, all cashmere and sharp angles. "We were so worried the traffic had swallowed you whole. You know how disorganized it gets when one piece is out of place?" It wasn't a welcome. It was an accusation. She leaned in, smiling for Tyler's phone, which was now pointed vaguely in our direction. Her hand was on the back of my chair. The other hand, however, held the metal turkey baster she'd just plucked from the gravy boat. "You must sit up straight, dear," she whispered, her smile tightening. "Posture is everything." And then it happened. Fast, not a slap, but a precise, stinging strike. The metal tip of the baster whipped across my cheekbone. It was quick, brutal, and perfectly masked by the sudden clatter of Tyler dropping a fork. Steam was still rising from the gravy. The shock of the blow was cold, then hot. My father didn't flinch. The knife continued its rhythm. Scrape, pause, scrape. "Graham," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The sting was already blooming into a throb. "Lydia, just let it go," he said, not looking up. He tested the blade against his thumb. "The turkey is drying out. Don't make a scene." Don't make a scene. The family motto. I tasted metal, blood, mixing with the sudden, sharp tang of cranberry sauce from the bowl in front of me. I dabbed my cheek, pretending to wipe away a smudge. My fingers came back clean, the mark invisible for now. But I could feel the welt rising. I swallowed. I forced the bite of cranberry down, the bitterness coating my throat. I looked around the table. Tyler was busy adjusting his filter, oblivious. My father was now making the first deep incision into the golden brown skin of the bird. Vivian was instructing the caterer on the wine pairing. I cataloged every camera, Tyler's phone on the tripod, the small security dome in the corner of the dining room, the reflective surfaces, the glass of the china cabinet, the dark screen of the powered-off television, the polished silver of the gravy ladle. Every angle was a potential witness. Vivian slid back into her seat opposite me, her performance restored. "I do hope everything is all right with your finances, Lydia," she murmured, just loud enough for me and perhaps my father to hear. "I heard there was some trouble. An audit, perhaps?" My blood ran colder than the metal baster. "Last month, an alert from my bank. Someone had opened 2 high-limit luxury credit cards using my social security number and my mother's maiden name. They had charged $19,400 in 48 hours. Electronics, untraceable gift cards, a down payment on a boat slip. I had spent the last 6 weeks clawing back my identity, filing police reports, placing freezes. The fraud department had traced the initial IP address. It pinged from a server less than 5 miles from this house. Seacliff Bay. "My finances are just fine, Vivian," I said, my voice smooth. "Just a bit of identity theft. They caught it quickly." "Oh, how dreadful," she said, without a flicker of genuine concern. "You must be more careful with your information. You're so scattered sometimes." I looked at my father. He was separating the drumstick from the thigh, his focus absolute. He was a master of carving, of sectioning things off, of pretending the parts weren't connected to the whole. I could have left. I could have stood up, thrown my napkin down, and driven back to Harbor Point Heights. I could have screamed. But that's what she wanted. She wanted the scene. She wanted the unstable, emotional daughter storming out, reinforcing the narrative she was already whispering into my father's ear. The narrative that I was unreliable, that my judgment was compromised. No, I would not leave. I picked up my fork. I would sit here. I would eat this dry turkey and this bitter sauce. I would smile for Tyler's camera. And I would gather every piece of evidence, every glance, every whispered lie, right here, in front of all these witnesses. "The turkey looks perfect, Dad," I said, holding his gaze until he finally, reluctantly, met mine. His eyes were hollow. "It really does," I smiled, the metallic tang of blood still sharp on my tongue. "Let's eat." Vivian's world is built on chaos disguised as control. Mine is built on data. I am a project manager at Northlight Civic Labs. I don't just manage projects. I coordinate the flow of millions of dollars in coastal restoration funds for small-town economies. I deal in audits, compliance, and transparent ledgers. My job is to find vulnerabilities in shoreline infrastructure and fix them before the storm hits. My books are immaculate. My condo in Harbor Point Heights, the one I bought with my own down payment, is my fortress of order. I lease an electric vehicle. My life is a carefully constructed system, clean and defensible. This system was breached 6 weeks ago. It wasn't a subtle leak. It was a detonation. An alert on a Tuesday morning. 2 new high-limit cards opened in my name. The charges started within minutes. $19,400 in less than 48 hours. It was a digital smash and grab. High-end electronics, cryptocurrency vouchers, airline gift cards. The kinds of purchases that are fast, anonymous, and impossible to claw back once liquidated. The timing was precise. It happened the same week my father called me, his voice breezy and distant, to tell me he was simplifying things. He had added Vivian's name to the Cole family trust. "Just for convenience, Lydia," he'd said. "In case I'm traveling. You know how she handles everything." I knew. My mother died when I was 12. She was the original shoreline, the one who absorbed every blow. And when she was gone, the erosion started. For years, it was just me and my father. A quiet, hollowed-out existence. Then, 3 years ago, came Vivian. A whirlwind romance that felt less like a storm and more like a hostile takeover. She was a real estate stager from Sausalito who saw my father not as a man, but as a fixer-upper with good bones and untapped potential. Almost immediately, the rebranding began. Vivian curated our lives. She brought in Margot Vale, a PR specialist with teeth like polished veneers, to manage the family narrative. Suddenly, there were fundraising galas at the lodge, staged articles in local luxury magazines about the new coals of Seacliff Bay, and an endless stream of social media posts orchestrated by Margot, showcasing a life of effortless philanthropic elegance. My father, lost in the fog of his grief and loneliness, let her do it. He was just happy someone else was steering the ship. When the fraud alert hit, I did what I was trained to do. I reported it. I filed the claims, changed every password, implemented two-factor authentication on accounts that didn't even matter. I spent hours on the phone with bureaus and fraud departments, my voice a calm, steady monotone as I detailed the violation. And then I got the report from the cybercrimes unit, the digital footprints, the IP address used to fill out the applications, the one that bypassed the initial security questions using my mother's maiden name and my first pet's name. It wasn't from Eastern Europe or a masked server. The IP was registered to a commercial hub in downtown Seacliff, 3 blocks from Margot Vale's PR office, close enough to this house to be a rounding error. That was when a specific, chilling conversation from 2 months prior clicked into place. Vivian, my father, and I were having coffee. She'd been complaining about my father's disorganized digital life. "We really should have a shared emergency password. Graham," she'd said, stirring her tea. "A single, secure phrase for everything vital, the trust, the main accounts, even Lydia's portals, just in case of an emergency." The phrase hung in the air, a single, secure phrase, a master key. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a fishing expedition. It was the moment I knew she wasn't just an opportunist. She was a predator. My spine tingled then, the same way it was tingling now at the table. The back of my neck was cold. I looked across at Tyler. He was oblivious, spooning stuffing onto his plate while checking the engagement on his live stream. He lived in a different reality, one funded by fluctuating crypto coins and affiliate links for camera gear. His entire life was filtered through a neutral density lens, his face perpetually illuminated by a ring light. He wasn't malicious. He was just a useful, broadcast-ready idiot. He was also my witness. Vivian thought I was weak, disorganized, and scattered. She thought she had hit me and that I, like my father, would simply absorb the blow to avoid a scene. She mistook my silence for submission. She had no idea who I was. "I am a project manager. I document everything." The silver pin on my blazer, the one Vivian had complimented as quaint, was not a pin. It was a high-fidelity microphone, the kind journalists use for field interviews. My phone, resting on my lap beneath the napkin, was not idle. It was running an internal backup, capturing every word, every scrape of the knife, every saccharine threat. The app was designed for civic whistleblowers. It was untraceable, and it was already uploading a low bitrate audio file to a secure, off-site server, time-stamped and encrypted. I had come to this dinner knowing the turkey baster was just the appetizer. The main course was the trust, the fraud, the convenience, and I was starving. The turkey was carved, plates were filled. The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the only sound for a long, heavy minute. My cheek throbbed with a dull, persistent heat, a localized fire against the cool mask of composure I wore. Vivian, naturally, broke the silence first. She placed her fork down with delicate precision, a gesture of profound, manufactured concern. "Lydia, darling," she began, her voice dripping with the sticky sweetness of the sweet potato casserole. "You look absolutely exhausted. We've all been so worried about you." I met her gaze. "I'm perfectly fine. Vivian, work is busy, but manageable." "Oh, but that's just it." She leaned forward, projecting her concern for the whole table, especially for my father. "You take on so much, that job of yours, all those numbers, all that compliance. It must be terribly taxing on your nerves. It's no wonder you're feeling scattered, making little mistakes." There it was, the first move in her script. I wasn't just late. I was scattered. The fraud wasn't an attack. It was a little mistake. "I'm not scattered, Vivian," I said, my voice even. "I'm meticulous. It's a requirement of the job." "But are you?" she pressed, feigning a gentle inquiry. "Graham and I were just saying, it's so easy to get overwhelmed, and when you're overwhelmed, you get careless, especially with numbers, with security." She was painting the portrait, Lydia, the unstable one, Lydia, the careless one, Lydia, the one whose judgment couldn't be trusted with, say, a family trust. My father cleared his throat, shifting his gaze to the window. "Things were certainly simpler in the old days," he mused, his voice thick with a false nostalgia. We never had to worry about all this. Digital nonsense. Just a handshake and your word. It was his code. Simpler times meant before Lydia, before I started asking about the trust, before I installed tracking software on my own accounts, before I started questioning the new withdrawals. He wasn't reminiscing. He was issuing a reprimand. He was siding with her. Tyler, sensing a content shift, swung his phone towards me. The red record light was on. Speaking of that, Lyd, he said, I was just telling my followers about your job. You handle all those grants, right? What's the real risk of, fraud in that sector? Is it a big problem? He was completely oblivious. A parrot repeating the cues he'd been fed. Vivian had primed him. Vivian seized the opening before I could speak. That is such an excellent question. Tyler. In fact, she said, looking at me with that same poisonous sympathy. Didn't you have to take a leave of absence for that very reason? A few months ago? Something about a compliance review that went sideways? She delivered it perfectly. A casual question, laced with arsenic, an outright lie, presented as a shared secret. I felt my father's eyes on me, sharp and suddenly alert. This was new, even for him. He wanted to see how I'd handle it. I placed my knife and fork parallel on my plate. I took a slow sip of water. The microphone on my lapel captured the sound of the glass meeting the table. No, Vivian, I said, my voice cutting through the warm air of the dining room. I have never taken a leave of absence, not for one day. I turned my head slightly, addressing my father but speaking to her. My lab just passed a full federal audit 3 weeks ago. 0 discrepancies. We scored in the 99th percentile for fiscal transparency. We're actually used as the model for new grant rollouts. And as for personal security, I looked back at her. I carry a $2 million cyber insurance policy, personally and professionally. My protocols are spotless. The room went quiet again. I had not just denied her lie. I had invalidated her entire premise. I was not scattered. I was the model. Vivian's smile twitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible falter. But I saw it. She had expected me to get defensive, to stammer, to create the very scene she was accusing me of. Instead, I had given her a balance sheet. It was in that moment of silence that I saw my father's eyes dart away. It wasn't to the window this time. It was a quick, nervous flicker to his left, toward the antique mahogany buffet that lined the far wall. It was a piece my mother had loved, and it was always kept locked. His gaze was so fast I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching. I followed his line of sight, and I saw it. Tucked between the top of the locked cabinet door and the marble surface, almost invisible, was the barest edge of a pale blue file folder. It was thin, just a few pages, but it was clearly staged, ready to be retrieved. Before I could process the implication, the doorbell chimed, a melodic interruption. "Oh, they're here!" Vivian exclaimed, clapping her hands. Her composure instantly restored. The mask was back on. Right on time. The doors to the dining room swung open, and the catering staff, hired for the performance, ushered in the next set of actors. "Patricia! Ernest, you made it!" Vivian cried, rising to her feet and gliding across the room. Patricia and Ernest Vale, our town's biggest donors and Vivian's most ardent fans. Ernest was old money, quiet and assessing. Patricia was new energy, vibrant and utterly captivated by the Vivian Keats persona that Margot Vale, their niece, had so expertly crafted. They were the primary funders for the new hospital wing, a project Vivian was chairing despite having no qualifications. "Vivian, darling, the house looks breathtaking," Patricia gushed, handing over a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly car lease. "And Graham, you are a vision of domesticity." My father beamed, standing to accept the praise. This was his element, being praised, being seen, without having to do any of the work. Seats were shuffled, new plates were laid. The Vales were seated between Vivian and my father, creating a protective buffer of wealth and influence. I was now further isolated at the end of the table. Vivian lifted her glass, the crystal catching the light from Tyler's camera, which was now panning to capture the new arrivals. "A toast," Vivian announced, her voice ringing with authority and warmth. "To family, to gratitude, and to our dearest friends, who are the family we choose." She smiled at the Vales. "In times of trial, unity is everything. We are so blessed to be so united." As she said the word united, she walked behind my chair. Her hand rested, with seeming affection, on my shoulder. Her fingers pressed down. It was not a gentle touch. It was a calculated, precise pressure, digging directly into the fresh, blooming bruise beneath my concealer. I flinched, a sharp intake of breath. No one saw it but her. She knew exactly where she had struck me. It was a reminder, a threat. "I did this to you. I can do it again. Be silent." I kept my smile fixed. I raised my glass. "To unity," I echoed, my voice a steel rod. Tyler, meanwhile, was capturing the scene. He held his phone up, filming the toast, then zoomed in on the turkey as my father resumed carving for the guests. A moment later, my phone vibrated on my lap. A notification from Instagram. Tyler had just posted a boomerang. It was the knife, slicing the turkey, over and over. The caption, "Gratitude is an asset. Thanksgiving blessed family." He had tagged 3 corporate sponsors, a cookware brand, and 2 local wineries. He was tagging his sponsors while his stepmother was threatening his sister. The coldness in my chest solidified. This was not a family. This was a hostile business, and I was the subject of a forced buyout. Vivian was seated again, laughing at a story from Ernest Vale. She was in her element, insulated, protected, and in control. I looked at the locked buffet. I looked at the smiling faces of the Vales. I looked at my father, happily playing the patriarch. Beneath the table, I unlocked my phone. I opened my secure messages. My thumb hovered. The recipient was Ivy Rourke, my paralegal, the sharpest, hungriest lawyer in training I had ever met. She was on standby, working for triple time on a holiday, waiting for my signal. My text was simple. "We are live. Timestamp and archive everything from Tyler Cole's public feed. Effective 10 minutes ago. Stand by for document review." I hit send. The message disappeared, leaving no trace. I picked up my fork. The second act was about to begin. The chatter at the table rose in volume, fueled by the Vale's arrival and fresh glasses of wine. Patricia was recounting a hilarious story about a mislabeled crate of auction wine, and Vivian was hanging on her every word. It was the perfect cover. I pushed my chair back slowly. "Excuse me for just a moment," I murmured to no one in particular. "I need to check on something in the pantry." Vivian's eyes flicked to me, sharp and questioning, but she was too trapped by her duties as hostess to protest. I walked out of the dining room, my steps measured, not hurried. The microphone was live. It would capture the sound of my receding footsteps, the click of the pantry door. The air inside the walk-in pantry was 10 degrees cooler, smelling of salt air, dried rosemary, and cardboard. This was Vivian's command center. The caterer's extra supplies were neatly stacked, but one corner held a small, antique secretary desk my father used to use for his fishing logs. It was now Vivian's staging ground. I saw it immediately, a stiff white courier envelope from Shoreline Title Services. It was propped against a stack of linen napkins. Impossible to miss. My pulse quickened, but my hands remained steady. I didn't tear it open. I slid my fingernail under the flap, releasing it cleanly. Inside was not an original document. It was a high-quality photocopy, a multi-page document titled Consolidated Property Transfer. I scanned the pages. It was exactly what I feared, only worse. It transferred the Seacliff Lodge, my father's brokerage accounts, and even a commercial property I didn't recognize, consolidating everything under the single entity of the Cole Family Living Trust. This part was standard estate planning. The poison was in the addendum. I found the clause. In the event the grantor, Graham Cole, is deemed incapacitated or is otherwise unable to perform his duties as grantor, full and irrevocable control shall pass to the sole acting trustee. My eyes jumped to the signature block for the sole acting trustee, Vivian Keats. Not co-trustee, not successor trustee alongside me, sole acting trustee. She would have the power to liquidate everything. The document was dated, and it bore the clear, embossed stamp of a notary public. It had been finalized last week. A small, neon pink sticky note was affixed to the top page. Vivian's handwriting, sharp and angular, spiked across the paper. Sign at dessert, Margot cuts video, post at golden hour. It was a script, a production schedule. They weren't just planning to defraud my father, they were planning to videotape it, package it, and release it as a heartwarming family moment, curated by Margot Vale. The golden hour post would be the digital alibi, proof of my father's happy, willing compliance. My blood ran ice cold. I pulled out my second phone, the burner I kept charged and offline. I turned off the flash. I photographed every single page, the envelope, the notary stamp, the sticky note. I made sure the geotagging was active, burning the coordinates of this pantry into the metadata of every image. I slid the papers back into the envelope, my mind racing. This document was the what. Now I needed the how. How did she plan to trigger the incapacitated clause? I left the pantry and moved through the connecting hallway toward the laundry room. It was a pass-through to the kitchen, a blind spot in the house's flow. On top of the humming dryer sat another envelope, a simple business-sized one, marked personal and confidential. I opened it. This one was shorter, a new durable power of attorney for healthcare, and a new standalone healthcare proxy. Vivian Keats was designated as the primary agent. I was listed as the alternate, but only if Vivian was deceased or herself incapacitated. I scanned the definitions, the trigger language. It was not coma or terminal illness. The definition of incapacitation was a masterpiece of legal ambiguity, written by someone who understood narrative warfare. A state wherein the grantor is unable to make sound decisions or manage his own affairs, as determined by the primary agent, due to cognitive decline or significant emotional agitation that impairs financial judgment. Emotional agitation impairs financial judgment. The words echoed Vivian's performance at the table. Scattered, overwhelmed, careless. She wasn't building a case against me. She was establishing a behavioral baseline. She was creating a trap for my father. The moment he questioned her, the moment he became agitated, she could use this document, which she intended to have him sign tonight, to declare him incompetent. I photographed these pages, too. I turned to leave, moving through the adjoining utility nook that led back to the kitchen, and I saw it. In the deep, stainless steel utility sink, lying amidst the suds from the pre-rinse, was the turkey baster. The caterers had bypassed it. It sat there, coated in drying gravy. I leaned closer. Near the metal tip, exactly where it had struck my face, was a distinct beige smudge. My concealer. She hadn't even washed the weapon. She had hit me, dropped it in the sink, and walked away to greet her guests. It was an act of pure, arrogant negligence. The burner phone came out again, flash on. The light flared against the metal, illuminating the smear of makeup against the dark gravy. Click. Geotagged. Time-stamped. Evidence of assault. Sitting in plain view. I took a breath. Inhale 4. Hold 7. Exhale 8. I walked back to the dining room. The atmosphere was jovial. Ernest Vale was laughing. My father was smiling. Truly smiling. A picture of a relaxed patriarch. He looked happy to be handled, to be managed, to have the burden of decision-making lifted by his efficient, charming wife. I slid into my seat. Vivian glanced at me. A silent question. I smiled back. A calm, neutral expression. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her voice light. "Perfect," I replied. "Just needed a moment." My eyes dropped to the table, to my place card. Lydia, printed in an elegant, flowing script. I picked it up. I felt the paper stock. It was heavy, creamy, with a subtle woven texture. It was the exact same cardstock as the healthcare proxy in the laundry room. It all came from the same printer, the heavy-duty office printer in my father's study, the one Vivian now used for her charity letterheads, the name cards, the place settings, the legal documents stripping my father of his autonomy. It was all part of one cohesive production. The plan formed in my mind, clear and cold as the air in the pantry. They were building a stage. They had the script, they had the cameras, they had the supporting cast. They were about to film the climax of their story, the one where the loving wife selflessly takes control to protect the family. I would let them roll the cameras. I would let them push the papers in front of him. I would let them set their own trap. My only job was to make sure that when the trap sprung, they were the ones caught inside it. I placed the name card back down, angling it to a perfect 45 degrees. My smile was fixed. My eyes were cold. I was ready for dessert. The rich, dark scent of pumpkin pie and espresso filled the room as the catering staff cleared the main course. The veils were settled, glowing with wine and self-importance. Patricia was complimenting Vivian on the flawless execution of the evening. The performance was a resounding success. I turned my attention to Tyler. He was reviewing footage on his phone, a small, self-satisfied smile on his face. "Tyler, your setup is really impressive," I said, leaning toward him. I made my voice sound genuinely curious, the way a civilian would be impressed by pro gear. "You're not just streaming this, right? You're saving it all." He immediately puffed up, his professionalism engaged. "Are you kidding? Streaming is just the front end. I'm running dual backups. Everything's writing to a 2 terabyte solid-state drive right here." He tapped his pocket. "And simultaneously syncing to a private cloud server. Redundancy is key. Lid, you never, ever trust just one copy." "That's smart," I said. "So even if your phone died, you wouldn't lose a second of tonight." "I could throw this phone into the ocean," he boasted, "and the raw 4K footage would be safe before it hit the water. It's a bulletproof system." "Excellent," I smiled at him, a real smile of gratitude this time. "That's brilliant, Tyler, truly." I turned my gaze to the head of the table. Vivian was basking in the Vales's compliments. "Vivian," I called out, my voice clear and carrying. "I just have to say, this is an incredible production. The timing, the staging, everything is just perfect. You're a brilliant director." She tilted her head, accepting the compliment as her due. The Vales nodded in vigorous agreement. "Thank you, Lydia," she said, her voice smooth as the crème anglaise being poured. "It's not about production, it's about narrative, about telling the right story." She looked at Patricia, then back at me, her gaze lingering. In any dispute, in any legal matter, it's the story that wins. The facts just get in the way. You have to craft a narrative that makes a judge, or a board, feel something. That's the only real power. It was a confession, delivered as a piece of wisdom. She was telling me, in front of everyone, that the truth didn't matter. My burner phone was hot in my lap. While she was speaking, my thumb was already moving under the table. I typed the message to Ivy, my eyes fixed on Vivian's smiling face. "Verify. Notary Hester Lane. Seal code 51B. I hit send. The trap was now being set on 2 fronts. "You know," I said, standing up, my napkin in my hand, "before we have this amazing dessert, we should get a proper photo, all of us, with Patricia and Ernest, too. It's a special occasion." Vivian beamed. "What a wonderful idea, Lydia." "Tyler," I said, "your phone camera is fine, but that big one you have, it would look so much more professional. Could you set it up? On the tripod? Get the lighting right?" This was his moment. "Absolutely," he said, jumping up. "Give me 90 seconds. He retrieved his main camera, a heavy-bodied, mirrorless rig, and mounted it on the tripod at the end of the room. He unfolded two small, powerful soft light panels, and suddenly the head of the table was illuminated in a bright, shadowless, cinematic glow. It was no longer a dining room. It was a set. "Everyone, squeeze in," Tyler directed, peering through the viewfinder. As we rearranged ourselves, my father, now standing beside Vivian and basking in the artificial light, cleared his throat. "Well, this is actually perfect timing," he announced, his voice a little too loud. "While Tyler has the camera running, Vivian and I wanted to share something. After dessert, we have a little paperwork surprise." He looked at Vivian, a quick, nervous glance. "Just some family housekeeping we've been meaning to finalize, a way to simplify things for all of us." As he said, "simplify things," Vivian's hand, which was resting on his arm for the photo, tightened. Her fingers dug into his forearm. Just for a second. It wasn't a caress. It was a signal. Stick to the script. I saw it, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that Tyler's 4K camera, now rolling, saw it too. My phone vibrated in my lap, a single, sharp buzz. I waited for Tyler to finish fussing with the focus. "Perfect," he said. "Everyone smile." We smiled. The flash of the still photo popped, but the video kept recording. As everyone began to settle, I glanced down. A new message from Ivy. "Got it. Hester Lane. Notary commission for Seacliff County expired 92 days ago, on August 10th. She's inactive. Any document she stamped after that date is legally void. This isn't just invalid. Lydia, this is felony-grade fraud." My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird. Void. I stood up again, my mind racing, the pieces clicking into place faster than I could process. I needed one more thing. I needed the camera to see the documents themselves. "Dad, that's so lovely," I said, my voice infused with a new, slightly shaky emotion. It wasn't hard to fake. "But before you do that, I just had a thought. I was feeling a little sentimental." I looked at my father, forcing a well of emotion into my eyes. "I'd love a tour of the house. I know that sounds silly, but for Mom, I want to make a digital album for her, of all her favorite things. The fireplace she designed, the view from the study." I turned to Tyler. "Tyler, could you film it for me? Just a quick walkthrough. Get all the angles. It would mean the world to me." Vivian's smile tightened. This was not in her script. "Lydia, darling, we have guests, and dessert is waiting." "It'll only take 5 minutes," I insisted, my voice bordering on a plea. "For Mom, please." I had invoked my mother's ghost. It was a card I rarely played, and it was devastatingly effective. My father's face softened. "Of course, Lydia. Of course. Tyler, grab your camera." Vivian was trapped. To refuse would make her look monstrous in front of the veils. "Fine," she snapped, her voice losing its warmth. "But be quick." "I'll come too," Patricia Vale chirped. "I'd love to see the study." It was perfect. We were a procession. Tyler led with the camera, its lens light cutting a swath through the dimmer hallway. My father, Patricia, and Ernest followed. I walked beside Vivian, bringing up the rear. I guided them. "Let's go past the dining room, get a shot of the buffet. Mom always loved that piece." Tyler obliged, panning his camera slowly across the mahogany. I moved to the side, positioning myself behind him. From his angle, the lens was pointed directly at the buffet, and in the polished, antique glass of the cabinet doors, lit by the powerful soft light still spilling from the dining room, was a perfect, clear reflection. The reflection showed the sideboard on the opposite wall, and sitting on that sideboard, waiting for dessert, was the pale blue folder I had seen in the pantry, its title. Consolidation Pack was blurred but legible to any half-decent video analyst. Tyler had just filmed the evidence for me. We moved on. We went to the study. As Tyler filmed the empty fireplace and Patricia admired the view, my father stood by the window, his back to the room. I moved to his side. Vivian was distracted by Ernest, pointing out a ship on the horizon. I put my hand on my father's arm. I leaned in, my voice a whisper, aimed directly at my lapel. "Dad," I said, my voice low and urgent, "I need you to listen to me. I'm not scattered. I'm not unstable. I know what she's doing. No matter what she asks you to sign tonight, do not sign it." I looked into his eyes. "I want to protect you. Just say you need to read it over. Say you need your lawyer. Just wait, please." He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. But I saw his hand, the one hanging by his side, begin to tremble, a fine, uncontrollable tremor. He had heard me. The first crack in his denial had appeared. We returned to the table. Dessert was being served, pumpkin pie with a perfect dollop of whipped cream. Vivian watched me as I sat down. She had seen me whisper to my father. She had seen my emotional tour, and she had completely misinterpreted all of it. She saw a daughter who was broken, a daughter who was clinging to the past, emotionally fragile, just as she had been painting me. She thought my tour was a breakdown, a final surrender to nostalgia and grief. She thought my whisper to my father was a last, pathetic plea. She thought I was defeated. She smiled at me as she picked up her dessert fork. It was a warm, generous, victorious smile, the smile of a predator that has finally cornered its prey. The stage was set. The audience was seated. The curtain was about to rise on her final, triumphant act. The pie was served. Vivian waited until everyone had taken their first bite of the warm, spiced pumpkin. The Vales were murmuring their approval. My father was staring at his plate. Tyler was framing a close-up of the dessert for his followers. Vivian lifted her dessert spoon and tapped it lightly against her water glass. The clear crystal ding cut through the conversation. It was a practice sound, a gentle call to order. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," she said, her voice brimming with a solemn, practiced warmth. The Vales and Tyler looked up immediately. As Graham mentioned, we wanted to mark this special Thanksgiving with a moment of clarity. She reached to her side. Retrieving the pale blue consolidation pack from the sideboard, she placed it on the table in front of my father, next to his pie, Tyler. Sensing a scripted moment, dutifully swung his main camera on the tripod to focus on them. The soft lights bathed them in a glow. "Graham and I have been working for weeks to simplify our assets," she continued, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. "It's all about stewardship, ensuring the family is protected. Now and in the future, tonight, we're just going to finalize that." She opened the folder and produced a beautiful, heavy-barreled fountain pen. She slid the document stack in front of him. I could see the small, bright yellow sign here flags pointing to the signature lines. "Graham, darling, if you would," she urged gently, "right where we discussed, here and here." My father picked up the pen. His hand was visibly shaking. He looked at the page, then at Vivian. I let the silence stretch for a beat. Then I spoke. "Where is the notary, Vivian?" My voice was calm, conversational. It sliced through the warm, staged atmosphere. Vivian's head snapped toward me. Her smile was brittle. "I'm sorry, Lydia?" "The notary," I repeated, leaning forward. "These are significant legal documents. They transfer property. They amend a trust. They require a notary public to be present to witness the signature. I don't see one. Where are they?" Vivian laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Oh, Lydia, you and your details. It's all been handled. It was pre-confirmed by agreement. Everything is perfectly in order." "Pre-confirmed?" I asked. I'm not familiar with that term in estate law. "It's fine, Lydia," my father mumbled, his eyes on the paper. "Vivian and Margot's people. They said it was all standard." "Oh, this is for Margot too?" I asked. "Then we should definitely make sure we have a good record of it." I turned to Tyler, who had lowered his camera slightly, looking confused. "Tyler, you should keep filming this, all of it, for the family archive. This is an important moment. Just like Vivian said, we should have a clear, unedited record of the signing." Tyler looked at Vivian. She hesitated for just a second. Her plan was to use Margot to cut the video, to create a highlight reel. But how could she refuse to film a happy, unified family moment in front of the Vales? She was trapped by her own narrative. "Of course," she said, regaining her composure. "An excellent idea. Lydia, keep rolling. Tyler, capture this wonderful act of stewardship." She turned back to my father. "Graham, sign the page." My father raised the pen. "Wait." This time, my voice was not conversational. It was a command. I stood up. I walked the length of the table, past the Vales, past Tyler's camera, until I reached the kitchen pass-through. I reached into the utility sink, my hand plunging into the lukewarm, sudsy water. When I turned back, I was holding the turkey baster. I walked back to the table and held it up in the bright glare of Tyler's soft lights. The metal gleamed. The beige smudge of my concealer, though faded, was still visible against the dark gravy. "Before he signs anything," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a coldness that silenced the room, "I'd like to talk about this." I held it out. "Vivian, can you explain this?" Graham's face went white. The Vales stared, bewildered. I don't know what you mean." "Lydia," Vivian stammered. "It's a Baster. For the turkey. You're being hysterical." "This," I said, pointing to the tip, "is my concealer. The shade is sand. It's on this baster because 3 hours ago, when I arrived, you struck me in the face with it." I turned, showing the left side of my face to the camera, to the Vales. The welt was now a deep, angry purple, impossible to hide. "You did this, and you did it because I was late. You hit me." "That is a lie!" Vivian shrieked, half rising from her chair. "Graham, tell her!" My father was frozen, his mouth open, the pen hovering over the paper. "It was a kitchen accident," Vivian improvised, her voice climbing. "You were in the way. I turned around quickly. You're making a scene out of nothing." "Was it a kitchen accident, Dad?" I asked, my eyes locked on his. "You were there. You told me to let it go because the turkey was drying out." Graham stared at me, his face ashen. He said nothing. "She's agitated," Vivian said quickly, her eyes darting to the Vales, then to the camera. "You see? She's clearly overwrought. She's unstable." "Am I?" I said. I set the baster down on the table, a wet, greasy thud. "Or am I just meticulous? You said yourself. Vivian, I'm all about the details." I walked back to my seat and picked up my burner phone. "You're right about one thing. I am agitated. And this document," I pointed to the packet in front of my father, "defines incapacitated as," and I quote, "significant emotional agitation that impairs financial judgment." I read the words slowly, clearly, for the microphone on my lapel and the microphone on Tyler's camera. "You hit me," I said, looking at Vivian. "You manufactured my agitation, and now you're trying to get him," I pointed to my father, "to sign a document that gives you the power to declare him incompetent the moment he gets agitated with you. That's the housekeeping you're doing tonight." "This is insane," Vivian said, her composure cracking. "The documents are standard. They were certified. They are perfectly legal." "Are they?" I asked. I looked down at my phone. A new message from Ivy had appeared. Right on schedule. "Ready when you are." "You said the notary was pre-confirmed. Vivian, what's her name?" I don't recall. Margot's office handled it. Hester something. "Hester Lane," I provided. "Notary seal code 51B. Is that correct?" Vivian's eyes widened. "How could you know that?" "Because I checked." I held up my phone. "My paralegal, Ivy Rourke, is on standby. She ran a check on Ms. Lane's credentials an hour ago." I tapped the screen. "Ivy, are you there?" I hit the FaceTime button and placed the phone on the table, on speaker. Ivy's face appeared, sharp, professional, and framed by law books. "I'm here, Lydia." Ivy's voice was crisp, cutting through the dining room. "Good evening, everyone." "Ivy," I said, "could you please share your findings regarding the notary license of Ms. Hester Lane of Seacliff County?" "Certainly," Ivy said. As of 5:15 this evening, I confirmed with the Secretary of State's database, Ms. Hester Lane's notary commission expired 92 days ago, on August 10th of this year. Her license is inactive and void. The Vales both gasped. Graham dropped the pen. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Ivy, I continued, what does it mean when a document of this nature is stamped with an expired, voided notary seal? It means, Lydia, Ivy said, her voice turning to ice, that every single document in that packet is legally invalid. It's not just a clerical error, it's a non-existent signature. Furthermore, knowingly using an expired seal to certify a financial or medical instrument is a felony in this state. It is, by definition, fraud. Silence. Complete, devastating silence. Vivian stared at the phone, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. Patricia Vale was looking at Vivian as if seeing her for the first time. Ernest Vale was looking at my father with profound pity. I let Ivy's words hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. Then, I turned my head. I looked directly into the bright, unforgiving lens of Tyler's 4K camera. I looked past him, past the Vales, past my broken father, and I spoke to the archive. My name is Lydia Walker. I do not consent to this signing. I do not consent to any transfer of assets. I am stating for the record that I believe my father, Graham Cole, is being signed under duress and fraudulent pretenses. This entire event is being recorded. Ivy's face was still frozen on the phone screen, a digital oracle of doom. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of Tyler's soft light panels. Graham's hand, the one that had dropped the pen, was pressed flat on the table, as if to stop it from shaking. Patricia Vale was staring at Vivian, her mouth a small, perfect O of horror. Then, the doorbell chimed, the same melodic, programmed tune that had announced the Vales. Vivian flinched, a violent, galvanic twitch. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me, wide with a new, wild panic. She had been in control of the script. Now, an uninvited actor had just walked on stage. "I'll get it," she snapped, her voice harsh, all the velvet gone. "No, sit down, Vivian," I said, my voice cutting. "Let them in." The caterer, who had been hovering by the kitchen door, scurried to the entrance. We heard muffled voices, and then a sharp, confident click of heels on the hardwood floor. Margot Vale entered the dining room. She was the physical opposite of her Aunt Patricia, where Patricia was soft and flushed with wine. Margot was all sharp edges and monochrome. She wore a severe black pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a tight, architectural bun. She carried a slim black leather briefcase that looked more like a weapon than an accessory. She radiated cold, expensive efficiency. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the scene with the speed of a human scanner. She saw Tyler's camera, the bright lights, the stricken faces of her aunt and uncle. She saw the invalid documents on the table. She saw the turkey baster. She saw the welt on my face. And she did not blink. "Margot," Vivian breathed, a rush of desperate relief. "You're here." "I'm here," Margot said, her voice a dry rasp. "Right on schedule. I have the press release drafts for the announcement." She tapped her briefcase. "The Family Stewardship Declaration. It's set to release to the wire at 7 p.m., just after golden hour." She looked at me, her gaze impersonal, assessing. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Lydia." "Am I?" I said. I looked past her, at her gleaming black briefcase. "Tell me, Margot, what package did Vivian opt for? Is this the standard contested guardianship crisis plan? Or did she spring for the premium incapacity and asset liquidation bundle? I hear that one comes with pre-drafted non-disparagement clauses." Margot's thin lips twitched, the barest hint of a smirk. She had the professional cynicism of someone who cleans up the messes of the rich for a living. "You're out of your depth, project manager," she scoffed. "But you're right about one thing. Everything has a template. Lydia, especially when major donors," she nodded at her uncle, Ernest, "need a clean, uncomplicated narrative. My job is to provide that narrative." And what is your job here? Tonight? I pressed, my voice reasonable, curious. I turned to Tyler. Tyler, make sure you're getting this. This is Margot Vale, Vivian's public relations consultant. Tyler, to his credit, looked pale but kept the camera steady. He centered Margot in the frame. I'm asking a serious question, I said to Margot. We are, as you can see, in the middle of a private family signing, a deeply personal financial matter. Why are you, a PR specialist, present? Why do you have a media release scheduled to go out to the wire, synchronized to the moment my father signs documents he hasn't read, under fraudulent pretenses? The Vales looked at their niece. The color was draining from Patricia's face. I am here, Margot said, her voice turning to ice, at the request of the family to document a positive transition of assets, to frame the narrative. To frame my father, I corrected. You're not a publicist. You're a co-conspirator. You're here to package the crime. Graham, darling, Vivian suddenly interjected, her voice saccharine and desperate. Tell them you asked for this. Tell them how you've been feeling. My father looked up. His eyes were watery, lost. He looked at Vivian, then at me, then at the Vales. He was a man waking up in a house he didn't recognize. I did, he stammered. Vivian, she said it was for the best. She said Margot would help, make it clean. I'm so tired. He rubbed his temples, his whole body slumping. I'm just so tired. Everything has been foggy. Ever since the medication change, Vivian has been handling everything. She said this would just make it easier. She said I was getting agitated, that I was confused. The words, her words, the exact trigger language from the incapacity clause. He was repeating his own diagnosis, fed to him by his executioner. Foggy and tired, I repeated, the words hanging heavy in the air. Just like the clause says, cognitive decline, impaired financial judgment. I moved toward him. I picked up the untouched glass of water beside his plate and handed it to him. Here, Dad, drink some water. He took it, his hand shaking so badly that water sloshed onto the table. I want to try something, I said gently. I pushed the top page of the consolidation pack toward him. This page right here, the one you were about to sign. Can you read it for us? Just this one paragraph, out loud. He squinted at it. He put the glass down. I don't have my glasses. I have mine, Ernest Vale said quietly. He took off his own wire-rimmed spectacles and passed them down the table. My father put them on. He looked at the page. The silence stretched. He was trying to sound out the words. And in the event of grantor's incapacitation, he stumbled over the word, as determined by the sole, trustee, all, fiduciary. He stopped. He pushed the papers away, his face crumbling. I don't know these words. Lydia, this isn't what she told me. She just told me it was simple. It's simple, Graham, Vivian hissed. She grabbed the pen from the floor and shoved it back into his hand, her fingers gripping his. Just sign it. Stop letting her confuse you. Stop being so agitated. She was doing it, right here, on camera. She was trying to trigger the clause, to prove her own case. He's not signing that one, I said. I reached past them and retrieved the other document from the sideboard, the healthcare proxy. I unfolded it and slid it into the frame, right next to the trust amendment. He's not signing that, I said, until he reads this one, too. This is the one that defines his agitation. This is the one that gives you, Vivian, the sole power to declare him incompetent, without a doctor, without a second opinion. This is the one that removes me as his advocate. You were going to have him sign this one, too, weren't you? As part of the simple packet? Vivian stared at the document, then at me. There was no more pretense. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. My phone, still on the table, still connected to Ivy, buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen. visible to anyone who cared to look. Lydia, Ivy had written, "For the record, you are now describing textbook elder financial abuse, Penal Code Section 368, and the notary issue is forgery. Penal Code Section 470. These are not civil matters. This is criminal." I picked up the phone. "Ivy," I said. "Thank you for that. Can you repeat those statutes for us?" Ivy's voice filled the room again, cold and precise. "Penal Code Section 368, financial abuse of an elder or dependent adult, and Penal Code Section 470, forgery and counterfeiting, which includes knowingly filing a fraudulent document with a public office, such as a county recorder." I held the phone up, pointed toward the camera, then toward my father. "For the record," I said, my voice risontoing, "it is November 23rd. The time is approximately 6:47 p.m. My name is Lydia Walker. I am here with my father, Graham Cole, and I am formally accusing Vivian Keats, with the assistance of Margot Vale, of attempting to commit felony elder abuse and notary fraud. Using these," I tapped the voided documents, "as their instruments." Vivian's smile, the one that had been her shield and her weapon for 3 years, finally shattered. It didn't just fade, it cracked, like a pane of glass hit with a rock, leaving behind a jagged, ugly ruin. And that, finally, was what Margot Vale had been waiting for. She had seen her client's narrative collapse. She had heard the words felony and penal code. She had smelled the undeniable stench of risk, the kind of public, criminal risk that her retainers didn't cover. Silently, Margot Vale took a step back. She did not look at her aunt. She did not look at Vivian. She looked at her briefcase. With 2 quick, economical movements, she snapped the latches shut. She picked it up, her face a perfect, professional blank. "I believe," Margot said to the room at large, "that I have the wrong address. My apologies for the interruption." She turned, her heels clicking on the floor, and walked out of the dining room. She didn't hurry. She simply exited. The rat was off the ship. The front door clicked shut behind her. A sound as final as a gavel. Margot's footsteps faded, and the click of the front door was the only sound. It was an ending, the end of the performance. Now, the interrogation could begin. The veils were frozen. 2 wax figures of social horror. Tyler had the camera trained on Vivian, his face pale and slick with sweat. My father looked like a man who had just been pulled from a wreck, blinking in the harsh lights, unsure what was real. Vivian, however, was regrouping. Her hatred had cooled, solidifying back into a sharp, brittle anger. "Well," she snapped, "now that the hired help has left, perhaps we can stop this childish tantrum." She jested at me. "This isn't a tantrum, Vivian," I said. I reached into my bag, which I'd left by my chair. I pulled out a thin file. "This is an audit." I walked to my father's end of the table. I placed a single printed sheet next to the voided trust documents. It was the bank fraud alert from 6 weeks ago, the one for $19,400. "This is where it started," I said, my voice calm and clear for the camera and the microphone. "My identity theft. You called me scattered. Vivian, you said I made little mistakes, but the person who did this was precise." I pointed to the bottom of the page. The initial inquiry, it came from a commercial IP address in downtown Seacliff, the same IP block that I discovered this week, services Margot Vale's PR office. "That's absurd," Vivian spat. "A coincidence. You're trying to blame me for your own carelessness." "It's not a coincidence," I said. I pulled a second sheet from my file. It was a photocopy of a courier's dispatch log. "You were very busy that week, weren't you?" This is the receipt from Shoreline Title Services for the delivery of the consolidation pack drafts to this house. You signed for it. I laid it next to the fraud alert. I pointed to the 2 timestamps, side by side. "You signed for the packet, Vivian, at 10:04 in the morning on October 10th, and according to my credit bureau, the fraudulent inquiry that stole my identity was processed at 10:05 in the morning on October 10th, From that IP address, you must have been typing very, very fast to do both. My father stared at the 2 pages. Vivian, he whispered. It's circumstantial, she shrieked. You can't prove anything. You're guessing. You're trying to poison him against me. You're right, I said. I can't prove you were the one at the keyboard. Not yet. But I can prove your intent. I pulled out my primary phone, not the burner, my work phone. I'm sure this is also just a coincidence. I tapped the screen and played the audio file. A man's voice, polite and professional, filled the room. It was a voicemail, left on my phone 2 days ago, after I had called Shoreline Title Services pretending to be Vivian's assistant, confirming the details. Hi, this is Mark from Shoreline Title. Returning your call. Yes, the packet for Graham Cole is all set for the 23rd. Just confirming, as per Mrs. Keats's verbal instructions last week. This is a rush job. We are to bypass the standard 7-day family review period and waive the consultation call with the listed beneficiary. Lydia Walker, Mrs. Keats cited. Let me check my notes. Significant internal family conflict and a need to secure the assets before Mr. Cole's condition deteriorates. We have the packet ready as requested. I stopped the recording. Patricia Vale made a small, strangled sound. Ernest Vale closed his eyes. Bypass the family review, I repeated, letting the words sink in. That's me. You told them there was a conflict before there was one, because you were creating it. You needed me out of the way before I could see the documents. I looked at my father. She was setting you up, Dad, and she was using me as the excuse. Before Vivian could speak again, I placed a single, small, black USB drive on the table. It landed with a tiny, definitive click. And this, I said, is the rest of it. This drive contains a full, uncorrupted photo log, every page of the fraudulent trust document, every page of the healthcare proxy that defines agitation as incapacity, the sticky note with your handwriting, Vivian, detailing the plan to film the signing and have Margot cut the video, and of course, multiple high-resolution, geotagged images of the turkey baster from the utility sink, clearly showing the concealer from my face. It's a lovely collection. Premeditation, conspiracy, and assault, all neatly time-stamped. Vivian looked at the USB drive as if it were a snake. It's too late, Vivian, I said, my voice dropping. Even if you burned those papers right now, it wouldn't matter. I already filed a comprehensive preservation notice with the Seacliff County Recorder's Office. I sent it electronically at 4 o'clock this afternoon, before I even left my apartment. As of this moment, any document filed against my father's name or the property title for this lodge is automatically flagged, frozen, and routed to the fraud department pending a full legal review. Your notary was void. But even if she hadn't been, the packet would have never cleared. The trap was already set. Vivian's face was a mottled, ugly red. You. But I wasn't finished, I said. I held up my other phone, the burner, the one I had used in the pantry. It was still on, its screen dark. I knew you were a performer. Vivian, I knew you needed an audience, so I gave you one. I tapped the screen. It lit up, showing a simple, secure streaming interface. The red live icon was blinking steadily. This phone, I said, has been live streaming, not to the internet, not to Ivy. It's been streaming directly to a secure evidence portal. The portal belongs to Sergeant Aria Monroe, Financial Crimes Division, Seacliff Police Department. She's been my case officer for the identity theft for the past 6 weeks. She's been watching this entire dinner. She saw the assault. She heard the threats. She's listened to every word about the notary, the trust, and my father's agitation. She has it all. I tilted the phone so Tyler could see. Any signature tonight, any attempt to finalize that voided document, would have been an overt criminal act, captured on a live feed to the police. Sergeant Monroe would have had an alert, and so would the county recorder. You weren't just signing a paper, Dad. You were walking into a digital cage. That was the word that broke Tyler. I'm not part of this, he yelped, finally lowering the camera. His hands were shaking violently. I didn't know. I didn't know about any of it. Vivian just said we were making a family video. She said it was for the archives. I swear. He looked at me, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Lydia, please, I'm not part of this. I turned to him, my voice softening just a fraction. I believe you, Tyler, but my belief isn't enough. Sergeant Monroe needs the raw footage, all of it, from your cloud. The bulletproof system. You will email her the link to that server right now, and tomorrow morning, you will go to the station and give a full, truthful statement. If you do that, I held his gaze. I will make sure the sergeant knows you were a dupe, not a co-conspirator. You have 30 seconds to decide. Yes, he fumbled, grabbing his main phone, his fingers slipping on the screen. Her name? What's her name? Aria Monroe, I said, spelling it out. This was the end. The final, complete collapse of her stage. Vivian, who had been vibrating with silent rage, finally exploded. You bitch, she screamed, her voice tearing. You smug, sanctimonious little bitch. You ruined it. You ruined everything. You ruined this family. You ruined Thanksgiving. I looked at her. I felt the throb in my cheek, the cold anger in my stomach, and I let all of it go. I was just empty. You ruined Thanksgiving, Vivian, I said, my voice quiet, final. You turned a family dinner into a heist. I just brought the security team. The veils were already standing, backing away from the table as if it were contaminated. Ernest, we're leaving, Patricia whispered, grabbing her purse. They fled the room without a word of goodbye. And then there were three. My father had not moved. He sat at the head of the table, a king in a ruined court. He looked at Tyler, frantically typing on his phone. He looked at me, standing by his side. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at his wife. He looked at her for a long time, at her contorted face, her chest heaving, the hatred in her eyes. With a deep, shuddering sigh, he put his hands on the pale blue folder. He pushed it. He slid it across the polished driftwood, past the remains of the pie, past the gravy boat, past the discarded turkey baster. It stopped, perfectly centered, in front of Vivian. He looked at her. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Vivian, he said, is it true? She stared at him, her mouth working, but no sound came out. The money, he whispered. Lydia's, her identity, the IP address, the notary, the agitation. Just one thing, tell me one part of it isn't true. He was begging her, begging for one lie he could hold on to. Vivian stared at him, her face a ruin of her former beauty. She said nothing. Her silence was the answer. It was the only truth she had left. My father nodded, a single, slow, devastating movement. I see, he said, and he finally, truly, looked away from her. Vivian's silence was the confession. It filled the room, heavy and suffocating, more damning than any scream. And then she broke. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She lunged. It was a raw, physical act, an explosion of pure animal panic. Her body launched across the corner of the table, her manicured fingers clawing for the pale blue folder, for the courier receipts, for the USB drive. She was no longer a performer. She was a felon trying to destroy the evidence. I was already moving. I didn't try to pull the papers away. I simply slammed my hand down, palm flat, covering the documents and the USB drive, pinning them to the wood. I stepped back half a pace, bracing myself. Don't, I said. My voice was not loud. It was a low, flat command, and it stopped her. She froze, her body coiled, her hand trembling in the air just inches from mine. She was breathing in harsh, ragged gasps. Sit down, Vivian, I said, my voice as cold as the pantry. Or leave, but you are not touching these. Lydia. My father's voice was a ruin. I turned my head, my hand still planted firmly on the evidence. He was looking at me, not at his wife, not at the mess, but at me. It was the first time he had truly met my gaze in 3 years. I'm sorry, he whispered. The words were choked, ripped from his throat. His face was a mask of shame and a dawning, terrible clarity. I was blind, he said, his voice cracking. God, Lydia, I was so blind. She made everything so easy. After your mother, this house was just so empty, so quiet. And Vivian, she brought life back. She handled the dinners, the accounts, the noise. He shook his head, a gesture of profound self-disgust. I was so grateful for the convenience. I was so grateful to not be lonely. I didn't see the cost. I didn't see what she was. I let her. God, I let her put a wall between us. I'm so sorry. I just nodded. Once, my throat was too tight to speak. It was the truth. But it was 3 years too late. Graham, stop talking. Margot Vale's voice snapped through the heavy, emotional air. She had not left. She had been standing by the wall, her black briefcase at her feet, watching her client implode. Now, she was stepping back into the light, her face a mask of cold, professional urgency. She was still on the clock. This was just a new crisis to manage. This is a tactical error, Graham, she said, her voice a low rasp. You're validating her narrative. She turned her gaze to Vivian, who was still frozen in her half-crouch. Vivian, get up. Fix your face. The plan is still sound. Margot looked at my father, then at me. Graham, look at her. She's hysterical. She brought a dirty turkey baster to a formal dinner. She's been secretly recording this entire family. She's paranoid. She's unstable. She was trying to hand Vivian the script, to feed her the lines. This is the play. Vivian, Margot urged, her eyes glittering with a cold fire. Use it. The unstable, hysterical daughter, jealous of the new, younger wife. She's trying to seize the family assets. It's a classic. It works. It's the narrative we prepared for. Vivian seized the lifeline. She straightened up, pulling her dignity around her like a tattered coat. She's right, she cried, her voice finding its familiar, shrill righteousness. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Look at her. She's the one who needs a review. She's the one who's impulsive. She's always been jealous. She's trying to tear this family apart. I ignored them both. I turned my full attention to Tyler. He was still standing by his tripod, his face pale, his camera forgotten. Tyler, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through Vivian's accusations. Margot is right. It is a classic script. And in that script, they are about to cast you as the accomplice, the corrupted, weak-willed son, right now. Sergeant Monroe just sees you as a witness, a dupe. You have one chance to keep it that way. I pointed to his phone, the raw footage, and the truth, right now, or you are part of this conspiracy, your choice. I sent it, he stammered, holding up his phone as if it were a shield. I sent the link to that Monroe woman. I did it. I don't know anything else. You know more than that, I said, my voice hardening. My identity theft, the $19,000, it required 2-factor authentication, a code sent to a phone, my father's phone. Vivian couldn't have done it from Margot's office without that code. I held his gaze. Did she have his phone, Tyler? He crumpled. The truth came out in a rush, a pathetic whisper. She has all of them, all the passwords, the master account. She calls it the family hub. She set it up when she moved in. She said it was for convenience. He looked at my father, his eyes pleading. She used your phone all the time for the OTPs, the one-time passcodes. She said it was just backing up your accounts, keeping them secure. I thought she was just organizing. I swear. I thought she was just organizing. My father, who had been listening to this exchange as if in a trance, slowly, mechanically, reached into his own pocket. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely unlock it. We all watched. The only sound in the room was his unsteady breathing and the tap, tap of his finger on the glass screen. He was navigating, following a path I had walked him through years ago. Settings, security, account recovery. He found the page. He stared at it for a long, silent moment. Then he held the phone out, his arm rigid, his hand shaking. "The recovery email," he said, his voice dead, hollowed out. "It's not my email. It's not Lydia's." He looked at Vivian, his eyes finally, terribly, clear. "It's pradmin@valeassociates.com. He gestured, his hand trembling, toward Margot. It's her. It's her company." The digital chain was complete. The link was forged. Vivian was fully, completely, and irrefutably exposed. She had no allies left. Her PR specialist had just been named as a material participant in the fraud. So she fell back on the only defense she had left, the one Margot had just fed her. "I did it to protect you!" she screamed, her voice a raw shriek. She was talking to my father, but her eyes were locked on me. "To protect our assets from her. She's impulsive. She's reckless with money. Look at her. She doesn't understand value. She doesn't understand what we've built. I was protecting us. From her." I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't have to. The facts were on my side. "My credit score," I said to the room, to the camera, to my father, "is 824. I have zero debt. Outside of a mortgage I was approved for on my own salary, my job, which you call that little lab, manages over $20 million in federal and state funds. As I mentioned, that little lab just passed a full federal audit with a 99% rating for fiscal transparency." I looked at Vivian, my voice flat, calm, and final. "My impulsiveness is a documented, high-performing, fully insured asset. Your protection is $19,400 in fraudulent credit charges on my name and a multi-year conspiracy to commit a felony." I let the words land. The room can weigh the credibility. And as if on cue, from far down the dark coastal highway, came a new sound. It was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator, but it was growing. A siren, distant, but approaching. My burner phone vibrated on the table. A new text message from Sergeant Aria Monroe. I didn't even have to look at it. I knew what it said. "They're close," I announced to the room. "A patrol car. Sergeant Monroe is just checking in. She wants to make sure everyone is safe. She wants to know if you're going to hand over the evidence, Vivian, or if you're going to obstruct a criminal investigation." That was the final blow, the real-world consequence. My father stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor, a harsh, tearing sound that ripped the last of the silence. His face was no longer soft, no longer confused or weak. It was cold. It was the face of the man who had built an empire. The face I hadn't seen since my mother died. It was cold with a final, terrible, and absolute clarity. "Vivian," he said, his voice no longer a whisper. It was a command. "Get your things. I want you out of this house. Tonight." Vivian stared at him. She looked at me. She looked at the front door, where the sound of the approaching siren was now unmistakable. "No," she whispered, her voice a gasp. This is my house." "It's not," my father said. "Not anymore." Vivian's eyes darted around the table. She looked at the mess, at the overturned pie, the scattered documents, at the half-empty glass of deep red Cabernet that sat in front of her. With a sudden, violent, and spiteful movement, she swept her arm out. She didn't lunge for the papers. She knocked the wineglass over. Dark red wine flooded the table, a sticky, arterial wave. It washed over the pale blue folder. It soaked the bank statements. It stained the white linen runner. It was a final, childish, pointless act of chaos, a final attempt to destroy, to disrupt, to make a mess that someone else would have to clean up. "You can't prove anything," she hissed, as the wine dripped onto the floor. It's ruined! The wine soaked the linen, a dark, symbolic stain spreading across the table. It pooled around the base of the centerpiece and dripped onto the floor. Vivian was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She had made her last, pathetic move, a toddler's tantrum, meant to ruin the evidence. I didn't even look at the mess. I just held my hand, palm down, on the USB drive. That won't work, Vivian, I said, my voice quiet. The wine can't touch the cloud. It can't erase the server. It can't stop the live stream. The sirens were closer now, a definite, slicing wail in the Seacliff night. Red and blue lights began to flash through the dining room windows, painting the walls in panicked strokes of color. Ivy, I said to my phone, still on speaker. Thank you. I'm hanging up now. I ended the call. I turned to my father. I am leaving here and driving to the courthouse in Harbor Point. I am filing for an emergency temporary restraining order against Vivian Keats on your behalf, citing elder abuse and financial coercion, and I am filing an emergency petition to immediately suspend all trustee powers and halt any and all modifications to the Cole Family Trust, pending a full forensic audit and capacity hearing. I looked at Vivian, her face pale in the flashing lights. You will not be allowed within 500 feet of my father, this house, or his accounts by sunrise. My burner phone rang. The screen flashed. Aria Monroe. I answered it. I hit the speaker button. Lydia. Sergeant Monroe's voice was pure iron. No static, no emotion. I have you on audio and video. My patrol unit is at your front gate. Are you or your father in immediate physical danger? No, Sergeant, I said. The situation is contained. The suspect is here. Vivian Keats, as is a witness, Tyler Cole, and Margot Vale, a potential co-conspirator, who I believe is still on the premises. Good. Monroe's voice was sharp. For the record, Ms. Walker, I am confirming that I have received a live feed from you for the last hour and 17 minutes. I have witnessed the suspect, Vivian Keats, admit to attempting to coerce a signature. I have heard her confirmed intent to use a fraudulent document. I have recorded your testimony regarding the physical assault with the turkey baster, and I have a clear visual on the resulting injury to your face. I have probable cause to investigate financial exploitation of an elder assault and felony-level notary fraud. My officers are coming to the door to take preliminary statements. Do you understand? Yes, Sergeant, I said. We'll be waiting. One more thing, Ms. Walker, Monroe said. I still have your camera feed. Tell your father that if he has a statement he wishes to make now, on the record, while the feed is active, it would be advisable. I turned the phone. Holding it out, I looked at Tyler. Tyler, camera, now, on him. Tyler, shaking, lifted his main camera and focused it on my father. My father looked at the lens. He had shrunk during the exchange, the anger draining out of him, leaving behind something old and frail. But when he spoke, his voice was firm. The tremor was gone. My name is Graham Cole, he said, speaking directly to the phone, to the camera, to Sergeant Monroe. I am of sound mind. I do not consent to any changes to my trust. I do not consent to any transfer of property. I hereby revoke any and all drafts of any document presented to me tonight, November 23rd, by my wife, Vivian Keats. He paused, took a deep, shuddering breath, and locked eyes with the camera. I am appointing an independent fiduciary, effective immediately, to review all family accounts, and I want her, he pointed a shaking finger at Vivian, to have no more access to anything. I revoke all access, the passwords, the accounts, all of it. I revoke it. Thank you, Mr. Cole, Sergeant Monroe's voice said from the phone. We have that recorded. A loud, insistent banging echoed from the front hall. The patrol unit was at the door. That was the sound that broke Margot Vale. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow of movement in the hall. She hadn't left. She had been lingering by the side door, the one that led to the gravel path, waiting, assessing. She had heard probable cause. She had heard felony. She had heard her name. She slipped out the side door like a ghost, disappearing into the night, her black briefcase vanishing with her. Tyler, who had also seen her flee, looked at me, his eyes wide. "She's gone, Margot. She just ran." "I sent the files. Lydia," he whispered, shoving his phone at me. "Look, sent. The raw footage link. I sent it to you and to Monroe. I'm cooperating." "Good," I said. "Stay there and keep filming." The banging came again, louder this time. "Seacliff Police, open the door." Vivian, who had been standing like a statue, a woman of wax and spite, finally moved. But she didn't move toward the door. She moved toward the table. Her eyes, dead and cold, fell on the turkey baster, still lying in the puddle of spilled wine. It was the only weapon she had left, her symbol of authority. With a low animal sound, she lunged for it, grabbing the greasy, wine-soaked metal. She raised it high, her target not my father, but me. It was a last, incoherent act of rage. "You!" she screamed, her face contorted. She never finished the word. My father moved faster than I had ever seen him move. It wasn't a choice. It was an instinct. He stepped between us. He didn't just block her. He slammed his open palm against her wrist, hard. The turkey baster flew from her grasp, skittering across the table and crashing into the utility sink with a final, hollow clatter. He stood there, shielding me, his chest heaving. It was the first time in my entire adult life he had ever stood in front of me. The front door opened. 2 uniformed patrol officers entered the dining room. They were young, professional, their eyes taking in the scene with practiced calm. The overturned wine, the scattered, soaked papers, my father, standing protectively in front of me, Vivian, coiled like a snake by the sink, Tyler, holding a camera with shaking hands. "Sergeant Monroe sent you," I said. "Yes, ma'am," the taller officer said. He looked at Vivian. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the sink and have a seat." "This is my house," Vivian shrieked. "You can't—" "Ma'am, sit down." The officer's voice hardened. "We are conducting an investigation." The other officer turned to me. "Are you Lydia Walker?" "I am." "We've been asked to secure the evidence and to take preliminary statements." "Of course," I said. I retrieved the black USB drive from under my hand, wiped the wine off it with a clean napkin, and held it out. "This is a USB drive containing photos of the fraudulent documents, the notary seal, and the assault weapon, all time-stamped. Sergeant Monroe also has the link to the full live stream." I pointed to my father. My father is handing over his personal phone, which contains evidence of the fraudulent account recovery email. I pointed to Tyler. "And Tyler Cole is a witness. He has already transferred the full, unedited raw footage from his camera system to Sergeant Monroe and myself." The officer took the USB drive, placing it in a plastic evidence bag. He turned to Vivian, who had sunk into a chair, her face a mask of disbelief. "Vivian Keats," the officer began, his voice polite but firm. "We need to ask you a few questions. Can you tell us why you were in possession of legal documents bearing the notary seal of Hester Lane, whose commission expired in August?" Margot handled it," she whispered. "And can you explain the dispatch log from Shoreline Title, the one that coincides to the minute with a fraudulent credit inquiry against Lydia Walker's name, originating from an IP address linked to Margot Vale's office?" I don't know anything about that." "Ma'am," the officer said, his patience thinning. "We're going to need you to come with us. We have a few more questions for you down at the station." They didn't put her in handcuffs, not here, not yet, but they flanked her, one in front, one behind. As they escorted her out of the dining room, she was, for all intents and purposes, in custody. As she passed, her eyes met mine. They were not filled with hatred anymore. They were just empty. The lights were out. As the patrol car's doors slammed shut outside, the officer's radio crackled. Unit 4, be advised, the dispatcher's voice said. Neighbor at 41 Seacliff Drive reports a dark-colored sedan. License plate 8 David King 120. Registered to a Margot Vale. Was seen leaving the adjacent property at a high rate of speed. We have a bolo out for the vehicle. Proceeding. The officer looked at me. Looks like Ms. Vale won't be far behind. He handed my father a card. Sir, we've secured the scene. Sergeant Monroe will be in touch tomorrow. We have an independent lawyer on the way, arranged by Ms. Walker, to handle the fiduciary changes. My father just nodded, his face gray. The officers left. Tyler sat on the floor, his head in his hands, quietly sobbing. And then, for a long time, there was silence. An hour later, a quiet, middle-aged woman in a sensible suit arrived. Her name was Eileen. She was the independent fiduciary Ivy had arranged, a court-appointed lawyer who specialized in elder asset protection. She spoke to my father gently, quietly, with no judgment. She laid out new, clean, and simple documents, a full freeze on all trust activity, a revocation of all prior powers of attorney, the appointment of her firm as the sole independent fiduciary, pending a full audit. My father sat at his desk in the study, not the dining room, and he signed. His hand was steady. Eileen countersigned and notarized them with her own, valid, active seal. She took his phone, his laptop. She changed every password, severed every link to Vivian's accounts, to Margot's servers. The digital cage was dismantled. When she left, it was almost midnight. Tyler had long since gone, disappearing to his room. It was just me and my father, standing in the ruined dining room. The caterers were gone. The half-eaten pie congealed on the plates. The spilled wine had dried to a dark, sticky crust. I walked into the kitchen. I looked at the utility sink. The turkey baster was still lying there, a relic of the battle. I stood there, by the sink, and for the first time all night, I just breathed, in and out. My cheek was a galaxy of pain. The purple was dark, angry, and visible, but it didn't matter. The evidence was sealed. The locks were changed. The war was over. My father walked in. He stood beside me. He didn't speak. He just looked at the mess. His eyes fell on the carving knife, the one he had sharpened at the beginning of the night. It was still on the carving board, next to the carcass of the turkey. Slowly, as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, he reached out. He picked up the heavy, steel carving knife. He looked at it for a long moment. Then, he turned and placed it gently, blade down, into the kitchen sink. He finally put the knife down. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to connect with you, so please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from and what you thought. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.